Welcome back to the deep dive. Really glad you're joining us again as we continue our seminar series. We're exploring the edible triangle, and this is all part of the Lee or R Super Fun Learning Hour.
And today, we're taking, I think, a really significant turn. We're diving into the work of Mélanie Klein,
Yes.
specifically her paper, The Oedipus Complex in the Light of Early Anxieties. It's a piece that, well, it really shook things up in terms of how we think about early development.
Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is really to walk you through Klein's ideas, which, I mean, they were revolutionary at the time, weren't they?
Absolutely.
She doesn't just, nudge the Oedipus complex a bit earlier than Freud did. She completely rebuilds the concept from the ground up.
That's right. She links it directly to these very primitive anxieties, to the mechanism of splitting, which we'll get into, and these dynamics she called the paranoid schizoid and depressive positions.
So the main goal here is to help you see how Klein saw the Oedipal situation differently. It's not just like a kid wanting one parent and feeling rivalrous with the other.
No, not primarily. For Klein, it becomes this deeply internal structure. It's shaped profoundly by the baby's earliest fantasies, and we'll talk about that spelling and their anxieties about their own internal world, the world of internal objects.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're going to see how Klein took this familiar idea, the Oedipus complex, and just completely turned it on its head right from the very, very beginning of life. It kind of feels like discovering the emotional blueprint for everything later is laid down way earlier than we ever thought possible.
It is. Klein's work, it really reorients you away from the classical Freudian timeline. She focuses so much on the nature of the infant's inner world right from birth.
So the first big point from Klein is this massive shift in timing, right? Freud put the Oedipus complex in the phallic stage, say, 3 to 5 years old. That's when the desire and rivalry supposedly kick in.
Correct. That was the standard view.
But Klein just throws that out the window, doesn't she? She says it's happening much, much sooner.
Much sooner. She argued the roots of the Oedipus complex aren't waiting until age 3. They originate way back in the oral and anal sadistic phases. We're talking about the infant's first year of life.
Wow.
So yes, it's a radical rethinking. It suggests that those earliest feeding experiences, those earliest bodily sensations, are already charged with Oedipal significance.
That's a huge shift. It means the baby isn't just like passively taking things in.
Not at all.
From day one, this tiny infant is already experiencing this whirlwind of intense internal feelings, powerful fantasies, deep anxieties. These aren't just reactions to the outside world.
No, they're internal drivers.
Yeah.
They actively shape this early Oedipal scenario from within.
Yeah.
For Klein, you see, the infant doesn't arrive as a blank slate. They come with this incredibly complex internal world already bubbling with innate aggression and libidinal impulses.
Which changes everything about how we view development.
It really does. It means the very foundations of our desires, our conflicts, even our capacity to love and hate, it's all being established much, much earlier than psychoanalysis previously thought.
Yeah.
And it influences everything that follows.
Okay, so that brings us to the second crucial piece, these primitive anxieties. If the eatable stuff is happening so early, what's driving it? It can't be complex desires like an older child has.
Right. It's got to be something more fundamental, more visceral.
Exactly.
And it is. Klein introduced this really challenging concept that the infant is born with what Freud called the death instinct. This innate aggressive drive, she believed, manifests immediately as intense persecutory anxiety.
Persecutory anxiety, that sounds intense.
It is. This isn't just, mild worry. It's a profound, terrifying fear. A fear being attacked, annihilated, maybe poisoned by what the infant perceives as external bad objects.
Wow.
Imagine the most raw, undifferentiated terror a tiny, completely dependent being could feel. That sense that the world, or even parts of itself, are dangerous, are out to get it. That's the core of persecutory anxiety for Klein.
And you can easily see how just normal frustrations for a baby, like being hungry and having to wait for food or being uncomfortable, how those would just crank up these anxieties.
Absolutely. These inevitable frustrations amplify the innate anxiety and trigger aggressive impulses. And those impulses are then directed towards whatever is frustrating them.
Which then probably feeds back into the fear.
Exactly. It becomes a cycle. And the bad breast is her classic example here, the prototype.
The bad breast.
Yes. When the breast is frustrating, maybe it's withdrawn too soon, or the milk isn't coming fast enough, or it's just not there when the baby's desperate, it becomes the primary early object that is felt as bad.
Okay.
And It's not just frustrating. It becomes the target of the infant's destructive fantasies and also the perceived source of these terrifying persecutory fears. It's not simply, I want milk. It's this deeper fear that the very source of life could also be a source of danger or destruction.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, like you said.
Yeah,
It's not just about what happens to the baby, but what's going on inside them from day one.
precisely.
And this sheer intensity leads straight into her ideas about splitting and what she called the paranoid schizoid position.
Yes, this concept is absolutely crucial for understanding how the infant tries to cope with these overwhelming internal states, this terror and aggression.
So splitting is basically the baby's main defense strategy.
It's the primary defense mechanism, yes.
To handle these incredibly intense, confusing, good and bad experiences, the baby just chops up their world. Objects aren't seen as complex or mixed.
That's a good way to put it. They're either entirely good or entirely bad.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental strategy, really, to protect the emerging ego, the sense of self, from being overwhelmed or shattered by the intensity of these conflicting feelings.
How should we picture this? You mentioned diagrams in the source material, but how can we visualize it simply?
Well, forget complex diagrams for a moment. Think more about a stark, almost black and white perception. Like a child's early drawing, you might have a purely angelic figure and a purely monstrous one, completely separate. The infant literally fragments their experience of an object. So the mind creates these entirely separate mental images. The perfect, always satisfying good breast over here, and the terrifying, frustrating, attacking bad breast over there. They're kept rigidly apart in the infant's mind. That helps us grasp this internal world of split objects.
So the good parts are kept safe, idealized. But what about the bad parts, the scary ones?
Those are dealt with through projection. They're sort of mentally pushed outward. So the frustrating aspects of the breast, or later the imagined attacking penis of the father, these become externalized in the infant's mind as terrifying figures out there.
Okay.
But then, and this is key, through a process, Klein, called introjection, these now terrifying figures are taken back inside. They become internal persecutors.
Wow, so they're haunted from within almost.
It intensifies their fears, yes. It's like a kind of internal battle raging where these fantasies, and here we need to talk about that spelling, P-H-A-N-T-A-S-Y.
Right, not F-A-N-T-A-S-Y.
Exactly. For Klein, fantasy isn't about conscious daydreaming or wishful thinking. It refers to these very primitive, unconscious mental processes, these enactments. They're often filled with aggression and destructiveness, and they actively shape the infant's internal reality and the relationship to these internal objects.
That's a really important distinction, thanks. So is this where the early Oedipal fantasies fit in, even in this super early stage? It's obviously not the classic Freudian, I want to marry mommy thing.
Not at all the later, more structured complex Freud described. In this paranoid schizoid position, the Oedipal fantasies are much more primitive. They're characterized by things like destructive envy and aggression.
Like what kind of aggression?
We're talking about unconscious fantasies of attacking the mother's body, maybe attacking her insides, her womb, what the infant might fantasize as internal babies, and also attacking the father's penis, seen as perhaps part of the mother or as a rivalrous object. It's less about sexual desire for the parent and much more about annihilating rivals and internal threats that are felt to endanger the self or the precious good object. It's really a desperate struggle for internal survival.
That makes sense of the term paranoid schizoid, then the paranoia from the persecutory anxiety, and the schizoid reflecting that splitting.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here, as you said, is how these primitive defenses, like splitting, aren't just abstract ideas. They're core to the infant's actual psychological survival in a world that feels incredibly dangerous. Without splitting, the infant would just be overwhelmed, unable to sort good from bad, safe from dangerous.
But thankfully, we don't stay stuck there forever.
No.
We eventually move into what Klein termed the depressive position. When does that shift start to happen?
Generally, it begins somewhere around the middle of the first year of life. And it's a huge developmental achievement. It marks a shift away from that fragmentation and splitting towards a beginning of integration. A more complex relationship with reality starts to emerge.
So the infant starts slowly to put the pieces back together.
Yes. Gradually, they begin to see the mother, and later the father too, as a whole person.
Not just good or bad, but both.
Exactly. Someone who can be both gratifying and frustrating, loving and sometimes absent or angry, but is still fundamentally the same person. The good and bad aspects start to come together in the infant's mind.
And this integration, this realization, it brings a whole new type of anxiety.
It does. Klein called it depressive anxiety. And this isn't just knowing intellectually, it's a deep emotional shift. The infant starts to realize that their own aggressive fantasies, their destructive feelings, were aimed at the very same person they love and utterly depend on.
Oh, wow. I could see how that would feel. Well, depressing.
It leads to powerful feelings of guilt and sadness, a kind of mourning for the harm they fantasize doing. But, and this is incredibly important, it also sparks a powerful drive to make amends, to make reparation.
Reparation, like trying to repair the damage.
Yes, to repair the loved object both internally and externally, to preserve the now whole object from their own destructiveness. This capacity for guilt and the drive for reparation, Klein thought, is absolutely crucial. It's the bedrock for developing empathy, for mature love, for recognizing the impact we have on others.
So it's the starting point for understanding that people we love can also disappoint us or make us angry, and that our own anger has consequences. And instead of just wanting to destroy, we start wanting to repair and reconnect.
Beautifully put. That's the essence of the shift into the depressive position.
And the Oedipus complex, then, it changes its flavor here, too.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's not just driven by primitive aggression and envy anymore. Now it's profoundly influenced by this emerging desire to repair the internal parents, to mend the fantasized damage.
So wanting to protect them.
Yes, wanting to protect them, and also wanting to identify with their good aspects, their loving and creative qualities. It becomes a much more constructive, though still very complex, internal drama.
And the father's role evolves here, too, you mentioned.
Significantly. In the earlier paranoid schizoid position, he might have been part of that terrifying combined parent figure fantasized during intercourse.
Right.
But as the infant moves into the depressive position and starts to see parents as separate whole individuals, the father emerges more clearly. He becomes a distinct figure.
And potentially a helpful one?
Potentially very helpful. He can offer an escape route, if you like, from the intense, sometimes overwhelming, ambivalent relationship with the mother.
Ah, okay. A bit of breathing room.
A bit of breathing room, exactly.
Right.
He provides new internal objects for the infant to interject, to take in. This helps the infant differentiate themselves further, find other sources of love and security, and it moves them beyond being solely focused on the mother. It makes for a richer, more complex internal world.
That makes a lot of sense.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this capacity for guilt, the drive for reparation, recognizing others as whole, complex people. These aren't just infant phenomena. They are absolutely fundamental to our adult ability to form meaningful, loving relationships. It's the foundation of our ethical sense, our empathy, our ability to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of real-world connections.
So what Klein is showing us is, the baby isn't just reacting to things. They're actively building an entire internal universe.
Yes.
Full of heroes and villains, which then gradually merge into more realistic whole figures. And all this is happening before they can even properly talk.
It's an astonishing amount of psychic work happening.
Which really brings us back to her profound reframing of the whole Oedipal situation.
It is profound. She really moved beyond Freud's focus on the external triangle, the child's observable desire for one parent, rivalry with the other. For Klein, the Oedipus complex is fundamentally an internal drama.
A drama of
a dynamic interplay of these powerful fancies, these deep anxieties, and the constant ongoing internal struggle between love and hate, between integration and destruction. It's all happening within the infant's mind, played out with their internal representations of the parents.
So it's less about the actual mother and father standing there and more about the mother and father who live inside the baby's head.
In essence, yes. It's all about those internal objects, as she called them. Our internal world, according to Klein, is populated by these psychological representations of our parents, hearts of our parents, aspects of our relationship with them.
And these internal objects aren't static. They're constantly being shaped.
Constantly. Shaped not just by external events, but by our earliest experiences filtered through our fantasy life, our aggression, our love, our envy.
Envy comes into it, too.
Oh, yes. Envy, particularly towards the mother's seemingly all-powerful breast, or later, towards the parent's ability to create things together, their procreative capacity, and also, hopefully, emerging gratitude. It's an incredibly dynamic and fertile internal landscape.
So even something like the primal scene, the idea of the child witnessing or imagining parents having sex, Klein sees that differently, too.
She does. It's not just interpreted as a potentially traumatic external event. For Klein, its impact is filtered through and shaped by these already existing early anxieties, persecutory fantasies, and envious feelings. It's the internal meaning the infant gives it, based on their fantasy life, not just the external observation itself, that really matters for their psychological development.
It's incredible to think about how much deep psychological work, how many silent internal epics are unfolding in those first few months and years. Long before our conscious memory even kicks in properly, it completely reframes what it means to be human right from the start.
Klein's work really forces us to see that the deepest foundations of our emotional lives, our capacity for love, but also for destructiveness, for guilt, for repair, are laid down in this incredibly rich, complex, and often turbulent internal world of infancy.
Oh, wow. Okay, so to try and wrap this up, Mlanie Klein just revolutionized psychoanalytic thinking.
No question.
She yanked the Oedipus complex out of childhood and planted it firmly in earliest infancy. She showed us the crucial roles of these primitive anxieties, the defensive splitting, and this dynamic movement between the paranoid schizoid and the depressive positions. It's a profoundly different lens on human development.
And her lasting impact, I think, is showing that the Oedipal situation isn't some phase you just pass through and leave behind.
Right.
It's an ongoing, evolving internal drama.
Right.
Deeply rooted in those earliest fantasies, those intense attempts to manage overwhelming feelings and relate to the figures inside us and outside us. It's really a lifelong process of working through those early internal conflicts, and they continue to shape us, whether we realize it or not.
Which leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? If the foundations of how we love, how we hate, how we feel guilt, how we repair relationships, if all that is laid down so profoundly in our very first year, how do these early internal object relations keep playing out? How do they shape our adult relationships, our conflicts, our ability to connect with people, maybe in ways we're still completely unaware of?
Indeed.
It really makes you think about the echoes of infancy in our lives right now.
And that, I'd say, is a question well worth pondering long after this deep dive ends.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive, part of the Leor Super Fun Learning Hour seminar series. We really hope this was insightful, and we'll see you next time as we continue digging into the Oedipal Triangle.